welcome to Conversations with Al McFarland. Starting today's program a little early because we're playing an interview I did this morning with Minnesota Senator Tina Smith. We talked about today's MLK, Martin Luther King Jr. celebrations. We talked about recent events at the Capitol and the upcoming inauguration. Check her out. This is Senator Tina Smith.
As I was muted, it's so good to be with everyone. And I was just reflecting that even though we weren't able to all be together in person today, it was great to be together virtually. And I was singing in my kitchen. Now, I have to say, I've gotten used to singing hymns because when I go to church virtually on Sunday mornings, I sing along. And it's I'm not exactly sure how good it sounds to my husband, who's in the other room, but it's, you know, I think music just always fills our hearts. And this is, we need our hearts to be filled right now. But, you know, as I was listening to Ambassador Young and Dr. Bernice King and Dr. Lomax talk about the theme of this year's event, which is the call for bold action, I was reflecting on how sometimes when people think about Dr. King and his call for nonviolence, they were saying this, they misunderstand that as being sort of a passivity or they mistake pacifism for passivity. And I think that that's on my mind right now as we think about the need to actually believe in the truth and to follow the truth, the unvarnished truth, and then act on it with our feet and with our hearts and our minds.
Passive resistance is not acquiescence.
Right.
It's not surrender. And it's a tool and a strategy, and it can advance an agenda, a cause, an idea with power and with a force that's different from the violent, vicious force, but with a force that is moral and that is healing. So it's force nonetheless. But
yes.
So as you think about, did you know Dr. King? Did you ever meet him and work with him yourself?
No, okay. I never met him. You know, he died when I was about 10 years old.
Okay.
And so that he was a force in my family and in my household, Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy, actually. So, you know, I love to hear stories about him and the kind of person that he was, and there's a richness to his life. And what was also really interesting today was talking about the powerful women that powered Dr. King and Ambassador Young and so many. I think I loved something Bernice King said. Something that Coretta Scott King said was, she says, women, if the soul of the nation is going to be saved, you need to become the soul. And that fills my heart also as I think about my friend Kamala Harris about to become Vice President of the United States. The day after tomorrow, I'll be there to bear witness to that historic moment, and that fills me with a lot of optimism.
You were at the Capitol last week when the Capitol itself came under siege from what we're calling insurrectionists. Tell us what happened that day for you. What did you experience? You've written about it, and you can share what thoughts you've posted already, but I want to hear it from you. What was going on in your mind that day?
Well, for me, I went into the day not feeling very concerned about my personal safety or the safety of the Capitol, that building that I've grown to love so much because I work there every day. In fact, I told my husband as I was taking him to the airport to go home from Washington, where he'd been keeping me company there over a New Year's weekend. I said, don't worry, Archie, the United States Capitol is one of the safest places in the whole world. And so when it began to unfold and I was on the floor of the United States Senate, I couldn't really even process that this was happening. I remember seeing the vice president being, moved off the floor very quickly. We're all standing there. They tell us that the doors are going to be locked and that we're going to hold there and we're going to be safe, that the Capitol has been breached. And we're looking at our telephones, trying to understand what's happened, looking at Twitter. And I see a man waving a Confederate flag just feet from where we were on the Senate floor. And I couldn't understand it. It was only later when I really, truly, I looked at the video and I saw what had happened, and I realized that this wasn't just violence, though it was violence.
Mhm.
It was white nationalist violence. It was white supremacist violence, and people fueled by the worst kinds of conspiracy theories, and fueled by the president of the United States.
Mhm.
And that truth we have to deal with if we want to recover from this and repair the damage that we have seen done in our country.
Mhm.
And this was not new.
No, it's just becoming clearer and has become emboldened in a way that we haven't seen in generations. This is a complete unmasking of the spirit of repression and oppression that characterized supremacist thought from Jim Crow up through today, actually, but now completely raw, bare, open, and sort of given a pass or legitimized by the president.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so how do we deal with that, Senator? What do we do? Are you going to say, for example, I'm glad that the impeachment took place.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thought of what the Senate will do when it is delivered to the Senate?
Well, to me, the most important thing that we have to do is to acknowledge the truth of what has happened here. We have seen the big lie that the president has told for many, many months, years even, that if he didn't win this election, that it was stolen, that big lie. The big lie of white people in this country being threatened, which has fueled this fear and has reopened the terrible, laid bare, really not reopened, but laid bare the terrible wounds of racism in this country. So to me, the most important thing is accountability. There must be accountability for what the president has done. I was glad that the House impeached him, and I will vote to convict him in the United States Senate. I think that also the members of Congress, including Senator Hawley and Senator Cruz and the members of the House who did their best to overturn this election and who continued to tell the big lie, must also be held accountable. And the most important, then we also have to simultaneously show people that we can do the work of this country in the United States Congress, that we can address the deep harm that's been done by racism, by the global pandemic, by the economic fallout from that pandemic, and go to work for people. This is not an either or. And those who say, oh, we need to move on, that we need, impeachment is not the right thing to do because it makes our divisions worse. No, you have to acknowledge what happened in order to move past it. Accountability is how we move forward.
At some point in time, Senator, it seems we have to also figure out how to challenge the core beliefs and understanding of people that you and I would say have it wrong, because the basis for their view of the world is either a desire for or fear of loss of what they perceive to be the privilege they have, and that's white privilege, white supremacist thought. How do we get to those people eventually? I believe that my friend Professor Mahmoud El-Kadi, he reminds us to, in all things, say it's not the person, it's the deed, it's what they do. That every human being, however, is valuable and should be valued and should be embraced with the spirit and hope that they can be encouraged to be their very best selves. So how do we get to those people that are completely against any of the ideas that we consider progressive, humane, and appropriate for the future? What do you think?
Well, I have two thoughts about this. The first is that we need to dismantle the systems that contribute to these racism in our country.
Okay.
That are, racism is not an accident of our history; it is our history. I think that the way to do that is by focusing so strongly on issues of wealth inequality and fixing that problem through all of the things that we can do from a policy perspective. I also think, and this was part of the conversation today at the breakfast, is that I think maybe Dr. King said this, Bernice King said this, She says, people hate because they're fearful. They're fearful because they lack knowledge. They lack knowledge because there's not any good communication, and there's no good communication because people are separated.
Mhm.
And so there is a personal action that we all have to take in order to address that chain that leads from what is maybe seem to some to be somewhat harmless separation to the hate that it fuels. That is, I think, everybody. That's a spiritual thing, but it is part of what is what we're called to do, I think.
Senator, let me take the last question to have you reflect on the person you described as your friend. Talk about your friendship with Kamala Harris, Vice President to be Kamala Harris. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? How have you sort of handled the historicity of her her selection and her campaign, and now moments away, her being sworn in as the first woman, first African American South Asian in the vice president role for our country? What are your thoughts?
Well, for me, this is really personal. When, as you know, when I first came to the United States Senate barely 3 years ago, I was appointed to that job, and I came in, and one of the first people who reached out to me was Kamala. She brought me a bag of she called it her senator's survival bag, that included good advice, some Advil, a bottle of wine, and and an empty bag of popcorn, because every day in her office in the Senate, they make popcorn at 3 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of a true friendship between the two of us. And I came to understand her story, her love for her husband and her extended family. I learned that everybody in her family calls her Mamala because she loves to cook. She's a very warm and down-to-earth person, and she is fearless. She is not afraid to speak truth to power. And she is going to be an incredible vice president. So I, of course, in these last few days, my heart has been filled with joy for her, but also fear for her. I worry about her. I want to make sure. I was just, in fact, texting with her just a few minutes ago, and I know that she's doing great. And she is more than ready for this task. And I know that Joe Biden is blessed to have her by his side.
Senator, thank you so much. I have a million more questions to ask, but I know that your time is tight. I just want to thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your work. Happy New Year to you. And we'll be watching and, monitoring and hoping that you and all of your colleagues stay safe, that you're able to do the work that you have committed yourselves to on behalf of our democracy, our country. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Al. It's so great to be with you, and I hope to speak with you soon.
Absolutely. Take care. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Did that this morning at around 10:30 or so. Great conversation with Senator Tina Smith. We continue today, and I want to start the balance of the program by talking to one of my first guests who's on board, and that is Brother Clarence Jones. Brother Clarence, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, and thank you for the invitation.
Well, thank you for being here. It's good to see you, as always. Last week, we talked about the work that you're doing through the HUMAN Project. And I wanted to, and you wanted to take more time this week to explain the project and the important research, the data you've been working on to tell our community about what our experience is and what strategies may help us through the opioid crisis. So let's jump right into that. Talk about the project, the HUMAN Project. First of all, what is it, what it represents, what its vision and mission are, and then this particular specific research project you've done in partnership with the community and the University of Minnesota.
Well, I want to thank you for this time. The reality is that I think I'm coming back on your show next week to talk a little bit more about it. But the HUMAN Partnership really started off as a conversation that one of our members came and said to me that we had an opioid problem in our community. And I said, okay, I don't do opioids, so I don't know. I was working at a clinic, and I talked to one of my colleagues and said, well, we're going to be working on this opioid project. And she says, why? Your people don't do opioids. I said, okay, I don't know. What I later found out was that we had a real problem in our community around opioids, and that there was not a lot of conversations happening. And so we convened groups of people to talk about this issue, how it's going to impact us. One of the things that happened, Al, why I'm so passionate about this, was that at some point I realized that people were treating the opioid problem like they treated the crack problem. The problem was that for us, it was a crime. For other folks, it was a medical condition. And that just didn't feel right to me. And so for the last 4 years, the Human Partnership has been working, trying to figure out how do we address this so that our people do not continue to suffer from these kinds of issues. And so with that in mind, recently, we got a contract with the city of Minneapolis to take a look at this. And fortunately for us is that Human has always tried to be a genuine partner. And so we already had we aligned our work with a community that has already been working around this. So that was the Hawthorne neighborhood. So it was not like we were trying to come in and trying to tell people what to do. They had already had a long history about that. And they had been working with you around the issue of opioids and about drugs and substance abuse. And so what we did was we actually put together a project that was community driven with the University of Minnesota, with the neighborhoods, to kind of take a look and see what are the issues around opioids. And by the time we got this project going, it turned into the COVID-19 piece. So what we had originally planned to do was to personally meet with people, but we had to do it through IT and those kinds of things. And so we turned it into the COVID-19 opioid issue. So I think the reality of these conversations is that we wanted to find out what were the issues within our community and how could we address them. How could we give the community the information that they needed in a way in which they could go to funders, they could go to the city and say, this is what the community has identified as important for them, and this is what we need. That for me was the most important thing, was that we now had a voice to present some evidence-based information and data to say, this is how we need this issue to be addressed. So that's what we've done, and that's what we hope to present, which is to show that we can work with the university, we can get the information that we need, and we can have partnerships that will make a difference. Because ultimately what I want my community to be healthy. And the only way that we're going to do that is I can't come from the outside and tell you what to do. We have to have the information from the inside. So that's what we've been working on. It's been a project of love. And I thank you again for being willing to take this journey with us. Because, it's been, we're trying to learn, man. We're just trying to learn.
So take a minute and go back over what and how you conceived the Human Project. It's a novel idea. And even in the name, people need to understand, how what it represents and what the concept is. I recall connecting with you when you were affiliated, among others, I think, with Southside Medical.
Right.
Walk me back through the history of Human.
Yeah. So the Human Partnership really started off as a conversation between Dale Gates, B.J. Smith, and myself. And we were trying to create a parade or resurrect.
Dale Gates was where at the time?
She was with UCare.
Right. Okay.
Right now she's with Blue Cross Blue Shield.
Right. Okay.
Right. So we were just trying to recreate a parade in South Minneapolis because we didn't have a parade. Mm-hmm. As we started talking about what was going on, we recognized that we had some real serious health issues in our community that we needed to address. And so as we started talking about it, what we started off as a Southside event, we started to recognize that we needed to have everybody involved in this conversation around health. And so we got together and we decided that after a while that we would become the Human Project. And Human, every man has hue, and all of us are human. And that's how we came to that aspect of it, is that we had to be open to the fact that we live in a community where we have diversity. And while there is, for me, I'm an African-American male, and the people that started with us, they were African-American. We still recognize that we had to work together with other folk in order to make our community healthier. And so we came up with that whole idea about healthy men, healthy families, and healthy communities. And so what started off as a parade turned that into this whole health initiative that has really expanded worldwide. I mean, we're right now doing things in Kenya. I mean, and people are asking us to do a whole lot of things. We're getting ready to do an immunization project all over the state. I mean, so that's what it is. It's about listening to people. And what I tell people, Al, is that we're not interested, Human is not interested in doing projects. We're interested in making connections. There are other people out there in the community that are so much better at work than we are. Our job is really find who are the treasures in our community so that we can support them in their work. And that's really why with this project around opioids, Northside Coalition, they're the lead. Diane, I mean, they're the lead. My job is to try to figure out how do I provide them with resources and how do I make connections with them and with other organizations that are interested in the same issue, and how do we work together in order to make this happen. And I think when you look at our work, at our body of work, it's not about the university coming in and taking over. That's not going to happen, okay? What it is that this is community-driven, community-guided, but we're working as colleagues, which is a real different kind of word for us, but we're colleagues in terms of trying to address this issue. So that's how we started.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let me bring another voice in. You talked about the the jewels in the community.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the people that fits that description is my guest, Tabitha Montgomery. Tabitha is the CEO, Executive Director of the Powderhorn Neighborhood Association. I've had, I think, one, maybe two, but for sure, one extensive interview with her on Zoom in the past. And I told people after the interview that I had a headache. And the headache I had was the same kind of headache that John Lewis talked about making good trouble.
Yeah.
And so this was a headache that challenges you to think and challenges you to see things deeply, differently, clearly. And I have been bragging about Tabitha Montgomery since that conversation, because I believe that the energy, the insight, the clarity, and the conviction she brings to a conversation ought to be what all of us ought to be doing all the time. There's a level of seriousness in what she is saying and her describing what she is seeing. And she seems to me, fearless in her ability and confidence in articulating strategies that will move our community, our families forward. So here she is again, Tabitha. Good to see you again. I compliment you, not to embarrass you, but to say that the way, from my point of view, the way you have communicated is the way all of us ought to be communicating all the time. Good to see you again, my friend.
Good to see you, my friend. I must say that I am humbled out of my shoes, certainly having that come from you, and just how you have been in our community and elevating and amplifying not only the Black voice and the Black experience, but how it is all interconnected and intersectional to how our communities become healthy, a healthy and collective degree of health. So I am so appreciative to be here with my brothers on this amazing 92nd annual celebration, truly, of his life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So thank you for having me.
So reflect on Dr. King, the story of Dr. King as you know it, and as it has revealed itself to you in your life, in your family, your community. What does the idea of Dr. King mean to you?
I would honestly say he, for me, truly epitomizes how to anchor your entire life, your entire story, your entire journey to one salient truth. And I think for me, that is that he embodied love that was unconditional, love for what our communities and our collective society could be, truly loving what he was called to do in the midst of inordinate challenges and storms as he walked alongside so many other leaders in our community and outside of our community who decided that it was incumbent upon them to declare and to cast a vision of what unity and justice and healing looked like. And so for me, I think that when you are so clear on at least one thing, one guiding principle, and you are willing to wrap and immerse your entire life in that one guiding principle, you truly can shake the world. And I think that that, for me, is what he continues to represent, and truly might be one of the few people, truly in my lifetime, that I would be able to say that about.
Mhm. Were you born when he died yet? Were you even born?
No, I was not born. I say that in the sense of just how his legacy continues to make this indelible impression on future generations,
Mhm.
and to be in a different generation and still being able to truly pay respect and homage and celebrate the voices that came before us, and specifically Dr. King's voice when it comes to really encouraging and calling on people to wake up to what harm and ill pseudo divisions can do, and hatred, and truly, I think racism as a public health crisis and an issue that we are still clearly to this day trying to figure out the right ways forward to actually provide people who are hurting and who are suffering from those isms to figure out what are the right courses of treatment.
And so, how did you come to be aware of Dr. King? Where in your development as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5, 7, 10-year-old did you begin to develop awareness of Dr. King and other historic figures in community and in culture? And sort of walk me through becoming conscious in your own personal story.
Honestly, I think the first time that I really have my first salient memory was probably in third grade in school. And we needed to do a presentation about the impact and what did he stand for as young people, small people. And it was really about not necessarily the quality of the presentation, but it was about just being a part of that celebration. And I had the fortune of going to a very small parochial school. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan. Shout out to D-Town. And we definitely, I just feel as if the teachers and the administration, and even within my family, just knew the importance of having young voices to begin to reiterate the power and the importance of who he was. And so we didn't do a great job, and we didn't go deep. And it certainly, within third grade, anybody could question even the accuracy. But I would say that that is the first memory that I have of just understanding that I, like so many before me and so many after me, would be a part of keeping alive and remembering and celebrating just how not just one person, but one person and can inspire a movement and millions of other people to think critically about what does life really mean. And if we become desensitized to what life really means, and I think it's sometimes easy for these other ills of society to manifest themselves. Because truly, I think the essence of life is that, there's this, as a humanity goes, as living creatures go, as the environment goes, it all counts, it all matters. We are to love it all.
People want to equate, this is a big jump, the Black Lives Matter protest with what happened last Wednesday, I think it was, or on January 6th at the Capitol. I think those things are not equatable. They're not equal. But talk about that. One of them reflecting a reaction to injustice and perennial, incessant oppression, and a community reaching a boiling point and a lot of stuff happening. But the other reflecting the more recent one, the emergence, in my view, of and the emboldened white supremacist strategy, language, point of view, and its effort to reassert itself. And I asked you the question because you operate in South Minneapolis, the area I call ground zero for George Floyd and the things that emerged out of that horrific murder. And outside of it being what it was for George Floyd, it also encapsulated history and geography, not just Twin Cities, not just this country, really over the world in history in terms of the 300 to 500 year interaction between our people meaning Black, Indigenous, Native, and European conquest, imperial empire. So I'm throwing a lot at you to just reflect on. Go ahead and talk.
You know, truly, Mr. McFarland, I think that you ask that's a deep question, because there's a part of me that understands how anybody or a person could conflate what happened last week in terms of an insurrection on our democracy and at the state capitol, and how a person might perceive a peaceful protest. And I think that that's me saying that I recognize that anything can be co-opted. Mm-hmm. Anything can be taken and besmirched and used for ill-gotten intent or gain. And I believe that the difference is always trying to steady yourself to look closely at the underpinnings of what the conversation is about. So it's a difference between foundationally, you got groups who are coming together to try to operate or activate against a particular thing. One could argue there is shared truths to people who gathered trying to overthrow or challenge democracy, and then people who gather to stand up for justice. And then that's where the corollary ends. Because ultimately, I think that what happens is we have to continue to pull back the layers and think about, well, what is each group basing their behaviors and their language on? And I think that this is where facts become essential. It's essential when you think about any movement or any reason to protest, is whether or not the facts are on your side. Mm-hmm. And are you able to not only take the facts and understand from an emotional perspective what those facts mean to you, but then what I would call the single source of truth. Truly, what does that, from a definitional perspective, mean in society as having a central agent and essence of truth? And so if someone, again, when you distill your life down to some central and common ideology, it's easy to navigate. If we believe that every human being is of value, and if we believe that we should not denigrate or to see any other person as less, however you see yourself as a part of a cultural group, an ethnic group, and or from a sexual identification, or all the things that help define who we are, then I think that this is where we are beginning to really speak truth about those facts, right? Because there is no litmus test to determine that there is one cultural group that has a higher quality and a higher purpose than another. There is not a litmus test to say that because of who I love versus who you love, that there is one way to love that's better than the other, because at the end of the day, it's love. Mm-hmm. And so really, I think that what we have an opportunity to do in society is to not be angry about, to a certain degree, why a person could be co-opted and to be a part of something that no longer is rooted in facts or rooted in truth, because that happens. I think there's a bigger conversation that you can see that it's beginning to emerge around what do we need to do in order to help to center facts more easily in our society, especially with the advent of social media. What do we need to do to help to amplify truth and not to sugarcoat our history as a country and always relying on tropes about our exceptionalism and how we and everything that was started in this country was basically damn near perfect, which is not true. So it's really about embracing all the angles and facets of who we are. And in the center of that, seeing everyone as having value and wanting everyone to be whole. I think about those young activists and protesters, whoever you were, who lined the streets, who raised your fist, who used your voice, used your body to demand change, to demand justice, not only for the murder of Mr. Floyd, but every brown body that has been taken unconscionably by police or in our community by gun violence. And ultimately, I think that what we see in a group who's willing to do that, willing to use your voice to point out that there is harm being done to another group, that is the antithesis of raising your fist and raising your voice to say, let's commit harm. So those are on the opposite end of the spectrums, and so they can't be the same. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of understanding that they can't be the same, I also believe that people who are willing to raise their fist and raise their voice and declare that they're willing to hurt someone, that is also a clear cry for help. I believe that it is rooted in not being healthy, and how we begin to really figure out what systems and tools and structures need to be in our community to get more people to crave and to thirst being healthy and whole as an individual, so that another person's ideas or ideology doesn't have space to co-opt their beliefs and their behaviors.
And so how do we do that? How do we make that happen? We got 70 million people who supported the Republican ideology. I don't think that 70 million people were filled with hate and rage. I think probably millions and millions and millions, and most of them saw themselves as ordinary people that ingest the information in the environment that comes from a variety of sources. Their selection of content probably is a narrower bandwidth that elevates certain fears and certain ideas that they either may stand to lose what they believed they treasured as their privilege and as their legacy. And therefore, there's this angst or anxiety. How do you deal with that? How does the spirit of being single-minded, singly focused, as you described, Dr. King, how do we apply that spirit to resolving the conflict in individuals whose actions are dangerous to themselves and have been dangerous, murderous to us?
I think that there are a variety of things that we can do. And again, I'm going to try to frame it in what I described before as clinging to the essence of the core of the actions that need to be taken, which is we need to fund the truth. If we believe that isms and racism, sexism, or fill in the blank is in fact a public health crisis, we need to fund the crisis. We have to take a step back and say, well, how long did we sit back and not necessarily have the resources, the platforms, the people in order to disrupt, intervene, people who we could see communicating in a way that was toxic, making threats about the safety of public elected officials or otherwise? What were we willing to do to help to actually care about those people's health? I think that before that, clearly the country, the world is looking for accountability. And I fully believe that people who take that violent actions, who believe that the way to be heard is to participate in overthrowing a government, or in this particular case, the United States government, that has to be held, accountability has to be meted out. And yet I can say very passionately, and I also want those people to receive help. Mm-hmm. If you get to a place in your life where you're willing to climb a wall, where you're willing to yell at the top of your lungs, where are they at, because you want to do harm, you have to begin to think that there's a degree of at least at minimum being unhealthy, or at most brokenness, mm-hmm. that we have not collectively as a society put enough tools around to support. And that doesn't mean, Mr. McFarland, that we're going to heal everyone and save everyone and keep everyone accountable. But that does mean that those who are not suffering from the sickness of isms, and those who can still see the value in every living soul, that there is, I believe, a responsibility and accountability that we have to encourage our elected and appointed and our philanthropic leaders to fund healing. We don't have the right systems and tools in place to deal with brokenness. We don't have the right systems and tools in place to ensure that universal health care is available for people to actually access trauma or a therapy and to deal with trauma that they may have experienced. And so until we get serious, I think about how do we invest in the health of an individual. We should not be shocked and dismayed when an unhealthy individual takes community into their own hands.
So let me put this question to you two ways and center it on what's going to happen Wednesday, the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. The negative side of this is how much trouble are we in? Do you expect trouble from a troubled population? Do you expect, are you fearful, and should anybody be fearful of continuation or expansion of the vitriol that we saw in the assault on the Capitol last week? That's one half of the question. Same question differently is how or do you believe or what evidence do you look at in identifying resilience, hope, the will for peace and clarity as the reigning principles and inevitable outcomes, even of the challenges we're looking at right now?
I think my answer is the same for both parts of the question, in that I believe that every emotion that everybody in this country is feeling is valid, whether it's fear, outrage, frustration, discouragement, abandonment, whatever emotion that people in our community are feeling is valid. And I encourage, and I believe the way forward is, for most of us, if not all of us, is to really understand the feelings that we're having and then still choose to manage them. See, where we get in trouble, I believe, is when we allow our emotions and our feelings to do the deciding, as opposed to then being able to center the actions that need to take place once we recognize there's a lot of feelings in the world. So there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of distrust, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of there's fatigue, there's exhaustion, there's trauma, there's all the things. And in the midst of all the things, not judging those things, not telling someone to speed up in one of those things, and yet figuring out how do we, in the midst of all the things, center ourselves and say, and now we still have to behave as if our laws matter. We have to behave as if even those that we elect and appoint to positions of leadership are not always going to get everything right. We, as people who want to see this incoming administration successful, I believe there is an opportunity to, again, to know the facts, speak our truth, and be willing to partner and to understand that progress may feel slow, but we will win by being focused on steady advancement and not giving up and not becoming so overwhelmed with our emotions that we're willing to behave in a manner where we fight one another to get ahead. And so I think it's one and the same. All the emotions are important. They all matter because they exist in the same plane. And how we then, in the midst of all the emotion, use our intellect, use our cognitive abilities to decide what things and tools and systems need to be in place in order for us to strengthen our community as individuals in a collective. And like I said, one of the systems and tools that we have to embrace is accountability and justice. I hear a lot of calls for healing and unity, and I am all about healing and unity and love and appreciating the fact that people can do very harmful things in a very broken state.
Mhm.
And yet my appreciation for someone's sickness, for someone's brokenness, does not dismiss accountability.
Translate that, if you would, to what happens on the ground in the Powderhorn neighborhood. How does the philosophy show up in practice? What things are you doing that embody the principles you've described? Question one. Question two, in answering that, what are your expectations for the next 100 days? I think that all of us are breathing a sigh of relief with the departure of Donald Trump. We're not sure what his removal from the White House will mean in terms of his ability to still influence the political currents of the nation, of the world. That we'll have to find out. But we have a general confidence that things are going to be better with the Biden-Harris team. And that starts with the hopefully speeding up of the delivery and adoption of the vaccines for coronavirus, and the promoting of awareness and accountability, responsibility for individuals to use the protocols that will keep them safe and help prevent the spread of coronavirus. It also starts with the Biden calling an announcement that he's going to bring another $2 trillion to invest in individuals and families, neighborhoods, and in businesses and in infrastructure. And the thought that that infrastructure investment in particular ought to be in many ways centered in neighborhoods like Powderhorn. That's what I hear him saying. So given that, what is your expectation and what is your desire, and how are you preparing to mobilize your friends and neighbors, people that you serve at Powderhorn, so that you can be as ready as possible to bring benefit to the community from the possibility and likelihood of more resources? You said funding the truth, and there's a truth of the work that you do every day. Do you see the society through this new direction being able to fund the truth differently?
We got our work cut out for us, because I think the short answer to that question is no. No, I don't currently see a significant amount of evidence that we're willing to actually quantify all of the cost of the collective needs in our community so we can get about the business of actually funding them. And yet I believe that people in our community, elected or otherwise, and residents and neighbors actually want healthy communities. And so I think that there's a both and. I believe that there's a real desire by most people in society and community to be a part of a health community. And yet I believe that we've built up some behaviors that are not healthy when we are we speak very disparagingly about the cost of anything, because we all want to keep, in many ways, costs low or not be burdened by a cost that we don't believe is actually reflective of our individual needs. So I'm cautiously optimistic and at the same time skeptical about where we are right now. But I do believe that there is a growing call to do some of the things that we're talking about today, which is funding the truth, putting resources where they need to be in order for our communities to be healthier. I think about our role as a neighborhood association as being one of many trying to contribute to the health of a community. Humbly, we are just really one spoke in the wheel. We certainly don't believe that we have any more, place in helping to be a part of the solution than a resident, than a business owner, than an elected leader, city council person, or the mayor, or the head of a city department, or a coordinator, or an executive admin. However you see yourself in life, I believe that we are trying to walk alongside everyone and say that what the association has been attempting to do is to focus on two categories of work, which is helping to build a muscle around advocacy, which is building awareness and concern and action around facts, facts around the key things in our community that need to be championed, like housing justice and equitable development and livability and safety. We also attempt to play a role in bringing people together, to be able to highlight the assets in the community, to creatively engage the community through events and opportunities. We were fortunate today to have our 23rd annual Mlk Celebration, which we shifted online in years past. Of course, we've had the opportunity to bring the community together down at Powderhorn Park in the gymnasium, and would be able to see anywhere between 600 to 800 people join in a community meal and use artists to help us to, again, honor his legacy. And we needed to do things differently today. But I got to say, we are deeply appreciative and thankful for all of the artists that contributed today, and our MC, who is also a board member, and everyone who tuned in on YouTube and or Facebook. So those are the types of things in terms of enriching community and building community and fostering community that we believe that we are trying to do. And simply put, we believe that a whole lot of other people are trying to do that very same work, that same degree of intentionality. So I think that the way forward, even in the next 100 days of the new administration, is to navigate life with some humility. We all know that all the work that we try to do on any given day can meet any number of challenges, right? But that doesn't mean that we still are not committed or convinced that the work that we're doing is not valuable. And so that's me saying, I think that we have to give the administration some space. I believe that there will be things that the administration will be able to move and activate against in the first 100 days, and there will be some things that they fall short on. And I think, though, that where I'm encouraged is that I believe that President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris will speak the truth, and they will speak the truth from facts. And I think that we all should be mindful about how do we moderate our behavior to embrace both of those things. You have to ask yourself, where are you getting your facts? If all of your facts come from social media, that might be something you need to work on. If all of your facts only come from a very insular circle of people that you surround yourself with, you might want to think about that. And so I think that the next 100 days, in order for the incoming administration to be successful, is that we all as individuals need to come up with our own 100-day plan about how we are going to contribute to be able to be active participants in supporting the agendas that come forward and challenging respectfully the agendas that come forward, not backing down for the call for justice and equity, but understanding that all things take time.
Good comments. Always great to hear you, Tabitha. Thank you for those words, those points of view. Let me introduce you to Coventry Collins. I don't know if you know Coventry or not, but she's I know she's a former Southsider. She may still be in Southside. I'm not sure, but her family goes back a long ways. Coventry Collins is one of the co-founders, along with Tina Burnside, of the Minnesota African American Heritage Museum and Gallery. It's over on the corner of Plymouth and Penn in North Minneapolis. And it's a nonprofit that was founded in 2018. Purpose is to preserve, record, and highlight the achievements and contributions and experiences of African Americans in Minnesota. And the mission is carried out through exhibits and workshops, events that educate and inform the public about the history and culture and art of African Americans in Minnesota. The museum's logo is an African, West African Adinkra symbol. She can explain what that means in a minute. I think the name of the symbol is called Dwen Min Min. She might pronounce that properly, Dwen Min Min. And it represents the ram's horns. It means humility and strength, were the things you just talked about, Tabitha. And the museum says it chose that symbol because it represents the African American story in the United States, that despite enslavement, segregation, discrimination, resistance, and resilience, and other abuses, Black people, African Americans, have shown grace, perseverance, and courage. Coventry, good afternoon. Good to see you. Unmute your mic and join the conversation. Can you push your unmute button there? And are you hearing us, Coventry, first of all? And I am not sure. Let me send a note to Coventry. Do you know the museum, Tabitha?
I do know the museum, and I know
Okay.
that it's an amazing, again, example of what can happen when individuals decide to participate in contributing what they can to building a healthy community. And that certainly has been through embracing the truth of history, the art and the intersection of art and history. And so I think that we certainly have many examples of institutions in our community that can wear that, banner. But I believe that the African American History Museum over in North Minneapolis is just, again, another example of what's essential. How do we make sure that there are organizations like that that are essential in serving our community and that remain in our community because they are funded, that they have the capacity, they have the staff, that we don't keep thanking them for what they're doing and not ask, how can we help ensure that you're thriving and not just surviving?
So Coventry, I'm not sure if you can hear us. We see you, but it appears that your microphone is muted. And if you are hearing us try to join the conversation by unmuting your microphone, we're using a different platform than we normally do. We usually use Zoom, but today we're using, I think, StreamYard. And so some people may not be as familiar with StreamYard, and we may have lost Coventry. We'll hang out a second more and see. And if we don't get the connection, we can redo that interview. Clarence, jump in. What's your impression?
Well, actually, Al, I'm a member of the board for the African American Museum.
So there we go.
Yeah. But I do think Coventry is by far a more a better conversationalist about this particular piece. But the museum has been around for about 2 years, and I am really excited about the work that has been done there in terms of really reaching out to our community and really talking about what has happened in Minnesota. I mean, because that's what it's about. It's about the African American Museum here in Minnesota. And so there have been many displays that have been done. In fact, recently they did a Black Lives Matter event that, and they actually did a mural on the streets right there in front of the museum on 13th and Penn. And really, really exciting. And so, I try sometimes not to be too, I try not to know too much. But I can tell you that as the board member on the African American Museum, Coventry, Tina, and the other board members are truly committed to telling the story of Black Minnesotans and the history and the contributions that they have made here in the state. So, all the way back from the beginning, Bongo, I mean, and others, just the migration from the South. I mean, we've had exhibits and shows, and actually even had a hat show, to talk about the things that are of importance to our community. So, I am really excited about the museum and really want people to be engaged. So,
well, Coventry's back, but Coventry, I don't know if you hear us or not, but your microphone appears to be muted, and there's should be a mute button. Maybe it's not anymore. Can you hear us now, Coventry?
That's the voice is coming.
Yeah. If you can hear us, Coventry, let us know that we're waiting on you. I think you're not muted anymore. We just need to have you say something. And maybe she's not hearing us. So,
but yeah, the museum is located right there on 13th and Penn, and really it is it's open right now, and I think Coventry has the times and things of that nature. So I'll see if I can reach her as well.
Okay, listen, you know what? I think that we're probably going to have some technical issues here. Why don't we just reschedule Clarence with you and Coventry? This has been a great conversation. Thank you for what you're doing. You're going to come back next week, Clarence,
I am.
with your team. to talk about the research you've done on opioids. Tabitha, I'd love for you to be here as often as you can. These Monday programs, Tabitha, was to have you and your colleagues, particularly Carmen Means and Alicia. And last week we met Sam. What's Sam's last name? She's a new executive director over at Seward, right?
Yes.
You all are phenomenal.
I agree.
Human beings. That's number one. Phenomenal women. And we connected you with our friends in North Minneapolis in the last call with Diana and with Suzanne over at Phyllis Wheatley. And that was a rich conversation, you know, and it's okay for us to have challenging conversations. It's a good thing, right? And so my goal is to create a forum where we can speak freely and speak our truth, you know, and in a way that challenges each of us to think more deeply, more fully, more clearly. And we may be challenged in a way that we evolve, you know, modify, you know, and expand our portfolio of ideas and strategies. So I think that's important. And I'm particularly interested in being part of seeing Black women leaders collaborate. I think that between and among you, if you organize and work together, you have a unique capability of shaping the city's future around what NRP, what the new name of it can be and will be, what community involvement and engagement can be. So that's where we're going to go with this. Coventry, we see you're trying to connect still, and we're having a difficult time. What we're going to do is reconvene and maybe invite you back next Monday, Coventry, to have a conversation more in depth about the museum. With that, I want to say thanks to everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you, Kelvin, for organizing the streaming of the show. We're using a new platform. We're using StreamYard, and I think we're going live to Facebook and to a couple of our 2 Facebook accounts and to YouTube all simultaneously. We're getting better as we go. We'd like your feedback. Let us know what you think about the conversation. I'm Mlk, and we'll see you tomorrow. We do this again every day, 1 o'clock. See you tomorrow at 1. Take care. Bye-bye.